Hello, everybody. Welcome to VRIC Media, the most trusted voice in junior mining. Our flagship event, the Vancouver Resource Investment Conference, is coming up January 19th to 20th. We're going to have a bunch of great keynote speakers and guests there, including the two gentlemen that are on the show today. The best thing of all is tickets are free, so get yours by clicking the link in the description below. And without further ado, we'll dive right into our series of expert online panels. Today, I'm welcoming Lobo Tiggre of the Independent Speculator and Jeff Clark of the Gold Advisor to the show. We're going to discuss the gold and silver markets, metals and miners, and a few other things as well. Gentlemen, it's great to have you on the show.
Happy to be here, and both formerly of the International Speculator.
Yeah, well, that's right. Yes. Lobo was actually my mentor back in the Doug Casey days. So I have nothing but the utmost respect for him.
Fantastic. Well, it's awesome to bring you both together here. I want to start off with a broad question, and that is, what are the main themes and trends that you're currently watching when it comes to the gold and silver sector that you think more investors and speculators should be paying attention to? Jeff, I'll start with you.
Well, obviously, in the short term, that would be the Fed and what they do. A lower or lowering interest rate environment is positive for gold and silver and ultimately mining stocks. So if the Fed continues to lower rates or we remain in what the market would consider a low rate environment, then that's going to be very positive for the metals and miners eventually. In the long term, we could talk about so many things, debt, deficits, global debt. There's so many factors, but for me, ultimately, gold is a core holding until the financial system, the monetary system, is changed and becomes more honest and sound and stable. So, not holding my breath on that, but that's my whole period, right? So.
And Lobo, your thoughts, trends, themes you're watching in the gold and silver markets?
Well, I'll go ahead and be the sacrificial wolf here and touch the third rail since most, metals and mining types, hard money advocates tend to be in the Trump camp. And I have to say
Yeah.
that, Trump, whether you love him or hate him, everybody sees him as an agent of change, right? And change at best upsets apple carts, at worst can be chaotic. And again, even diehard Trump fans will admit he's hard to predict. So it's interesting how much the broader markets have rallied on someone who's so well established as unpredictable and somewhat chaotic. But I think this is relevant, and the purpose here is not to beat up on Trump. The purpose here is to say, look, this is a fairly well established fact. You may not like it, may or may not agree with me that it is a fact, but that's how I see it. And in addition to everything Jeff said, I think that's very supportive for gold and silver. If a world in which we have two hot wars, either of which could literally turn into World War III, has a more unpredictable CEO at the helm of the great superpower, that's not a world in which I can see people saying, you know what, I don't need no safe haven assets.
Well, Jeff, speaking of, debt and deficits, which you brought up, what are your thoughts on this Department of Government Efficiency that Trump is supposedly putting together? Vivek and Elon are going to go in there and cut the fat, supposedly reduce government expenditures. Is this all smoke and mirrors? Is this something that could have a material impact? What are your thoughts?
I mean, in principle, it's a good thing. The government, I think most people would agree, has too much fat, too much spending. They need to rein that in. There is too much inefficiency. So if they can do that, that would be great. Again, I'm not necessarily holding my breath because I think, as Lobo points out, it's going to be volatile. They may not be able to follow through on everything they say. And how does the markets react to what they do? So there's a lot of moving parts and a lot of possible outcomes. In principle, I like it. I'll wait and see if it actually takes place.
Lobo, what do you think? Is Doge for real?
I think it's hilarious that we even get to call it Doge. Elon has so mastered the narrative that nobody's calling it doggy. Uh, but but yeah, no, it's kind of interesting to me to hear Jeff say this is twice now. He said he hasn't held his breath. He's resisting the narrative, the jumping on the popular bandwagon. And I don't think I'll be dissing Jeff here if I point out, he did say I was his mentor. And I remember when he first came to me, you may not believe this looking at her hair color, but he was like this little kid. He was excited about the rocks and being able to be part of the KZ team. And he'd say, Mama, look at this. This company's going to double their production next year. And I'd say, oh, well, how do you know that? Well, they said so. I said, Jeff, go back. Of course they said so. What do you think? Do some due diligence here. So I just love to hear Jeff now being the one saying, well, don't get so quick. Don't put the cart ahead of the horse. Hold your horses. Let's think about this. So I'll just agree with what Jeff said. Easier said than done. Been tried before. Grace Commission. What power do advisors have, even if they're billionaires? I'd love to see Elon walk into the Capitol with the sink and have the same effect that he had on Twitter, now X. But show me, don't tell me.
Jesse, I want to add something there real quick. So the greatest thing I ever learned from Lobo, I mean, I came into the company I was excited, but my dad was a gold prospector. I did know a few things, but the greatest thing I learned from Lobo was to be skeptical. And so from what he describes back then to how I am today, maybe his lesson has been successful. I don't know. So.
Quick break here, guys. Today's episode is brought to you by Copernico Metals. Now, regular viewers of my channel will be familiar with the entrepreneur behind Copernico. His name is Ivan Bebek. Now, although a young man in this business, Ivan's already created tremendous value for his shareholders in the past, namely with Caden Resources, which he sold to Agnico Eagle, and Keegan Resources, which became a mine now owned by Galliano Gold. Now, Ivan has surrounded himself with expertise from BHP, Newmont, and Barrick on his board at Copernico Metals. Check out copernicometals.com. Now back to the interview.
Yeah, it certainly appears that way. Last thing on Trump and his campaign, and then we'll move on to gold and silver mining stocks. He ran his campaign a lot on being a pro-crypto candidate. Lobo, you mentioned a lot of gold bugs are pro-Trump. That seems to be the case if you look at comments left on my own channel, Commodity Culture, when I talk about gold. However, there was no talk of gold during his campaign, at least none that I heard of, or returning to sound money, anything like this. It was, I'm not going to take your Bitcoin away. We're going to be pro-crypto. He's speaking at Bitcoin conferences. We've obviously seen BlackRock's Bitcoin ETF take off. Very interesting. As we sit here today, the price of Bitcoin is almost $100,000, which seems absolutely insane. But here we are. Do you think crypto in some way has eaten gold's lunch here, and that the younger investors are more attracted to this digital shiny object than gold itself when it comes to an alternative to the dollar? Lobo, I'll start with you on this one.
No, 100% the opposite. I mean, those younger investors, they weren't going to buy gold anyway. That was a boomer thing, right? And I've said this before, it's not new, but I really believe this to be true. The gold bugs and the crypto crowd, they should stop hating on each other. It's a waste of time. The real enemy is fiat. Okay. I mean, get over it, move on, stop the hate already. Focus, the enemy is distracting you, if you will, if you want to think of it in these terms. And the more we infight between each other, the better off it is for them. And to that point, you can even talk to young people about fiat. Now they get it. We boomers, actually I'm Gen X, but still we older types with silver in our hair, we're not getting through. People, they didn't want to hear it, but the crypto crowd is educated people. They get it. None of these kids expect anything from Social Security when they grow up. They understand that these funny little colorful pieces of paper we call money are worthless. And this is due to the crypto crowd. And I have not only met, I have worked with people, young people, who made some money speculating in crypto, and then they got the speculator's bug, and they started looking around, well, what else can I make money on? there are Bitcoin maxis that are going to hate everything else anyway. It doesn't matter. But everybody else, if the idea is to make money, well, what other markets are there? What other opportunities are there? And I have seen this in person. I know people who came to gold stocks and specifically, but mining and metals in the junior space, broadly through the crypto gateway, if you will. So I don't see this as oppositional at all. In that context, to me, it's rather striking that this Congress critter has introduced legislation to help with this, crypto reservoir by selling the gold at Fort Knox. That, Trump hasn't said anything like that, but that somebody would even suggest that. Like, why would you do that? It makes no sense to me. Especially, never mind. I don't go too far down the rabbit hole. Maybe Jeff has some things to say there. But no, I don't see these things as antagonistic at all. And has crypto eaten gold's lunch? Well, here we are hovering near nominal all-time highs. So no, I can't say that crypto has eaten gold's lunch in any way.
Jeff, your thoughts on the gold versus crypto debate?
Sure, I think there are some people who might be invested in gold or would have invested in gold that went to the crypto route. In fact, I was really disappointed when I learned that a director at a major gold mining company, or not mining company, major gold bullion dealer company, which I'll obviously really leave nameless, basically abandoned gold and is now a Bitcoin maximist. So there are some people out there that are like that. But has it eaten gold's lunch? No, maybe it's risen more on a percentage basis. I don't know. Earlier this year, gold had risen more than Bitcoin, but so I think there are some people out there that it might, but I think Lobo has a great message, and that is we should stop the hate, stop the fighting. These go hand in hand. They each have their advantages. They each have their drawbacks. So I think ultimately gold is going higher and gold mining stocks are going higher regardless of what crypto does. In fact, it's not just the crypto market. In my opinion, it's all other markets. When you look at the US markets, they're near all-time highs. And so it's going to probably take a bear market there or a correction or even a crash in those markets for some of those people, some of those investors to come back into or enter for the first time the gold and mining markets. I think that'll happen at some point, and that could be a big catalyst for us.
Yeah, and very difficult to stop that debate and that war between gold and Bitcoin. I hold both assets, and I've tried on Twitter to post a message of solidarity, guys. We're all here in it together. And the comment section was just filled with gold bugs and Bitcoin maxis battling back and forth. So I just gave up.
Yeah.
It's not going to work. Let's talk about the gold and silver mining sector. Obviously, when it comes to gold specifically, the valuation gap between the metal itself and the miners seems to be fairly large, especially when we look at majors like Newmont and Barrick, which have recently fallen quite dramatically. There's some outliers in there, Agnico Eagle doing very well. But then when we also go down to the developers, especially to the explorers, it's people expected a mania in the gold stocks with gold at an all-time high. I'm wondering what your thoughts are on why that is and what you think it will take for that valuation gap to close. Lobo, I'll start with you.
Well, the simple answer is that it actually started to happen before the correction and the Trump election and the smackdown that we saw there. When the futures hit 2,800, I mean, even on mainstream financial media, places like Yahoo Finance, where all they seem to want to talk about is Nvidia and Chipotle, they were talking about gold. And I saw people on Bloomberg even referring to gold as a crowded trade because it's just so obvious. Everything's so inflationary. Everybody's getting into gold. And the stocks were moving. So if you're thinking, oh, these gold stocks are broken, they're just not performing, it's simply not true. I am surprised, I'll admit. I thought that 2,500 would have done it. And it didn't really seem to light a fire under anything. But once it went at 25, 26, 27, 28, I mean, people were really getting on the bandwagon. And so, the good news is that, a lot of those momentum chasers get shaken out by a correction like this, and there's some shopping opportunities. But let me say one more thing, and I'll hand it over to Jeff. And that is, you look at something like the GDX, and you say, oh, well, gee, the stocks aren't giving us the leverage that we want. Why do we even bother with these crappy stocks? Well, because if gold goes up 1%, they'll go up 4 or 5%. But that hasn't been happening. What's wrong? Well, just think of the way you asked the question, Jesse. If you look at the GDX, you've got some companies that are falling flat on their faces or just underperforming, and you've got some that are doing great. So when you've got a bimodal distribution like that and you average, well, the average is kind of lackluster. But if you were to not look at the disappointing stocks and look at the ones that are delivering in spades, those stocks are doing great. They're at, 52-week highs or more recently multi-year highs. So it's simply not true that the stocks aren't responding. It is true that in this market, interestingly enough, the rising tide hasn't lifted all ships, at least not equally. The better stocks have done better, and this applies to the developers and the juniors, the explorers. You could see it across the board. So to me, as a stock picker, this is music to my ears. Jeff, what do you think?
I spoke at a conference in Reno last month. Great little conference, but I put a chart up there and showed the gain in gold at that time. This was several weeks ago. And I put up a chart beside it of GDX and GDXJ. GDX and GDXJ have outperformed gold to date. I haven't updated that chart since, but they were outperforming. There was some leverage there, much to the surprise of some investors. We have seen a couple doubles and a triple in our portfolio to date, year to date. So I think some of the better mining stocks are going to do better and are doing better, whereas the weak ones, are not. So it is a stock picker's market, and I think when you align with someone like Lobo, myself and anyone else that you trust, you can, find that leverage to gold. Now, your ultimate question is, what's going to make this, them all move up? I think it comes back to the general market, my comment on that. When that market goes into a correction, a long-term bear market, a crash, whatever, I think when those investors see that they're not making any money, they're losing money, they're going to go into other sectors. And I think with the green on the screen, with the producers, if you will, with the higher gold price, that's going to attract some of them. And so I think that's yet to come. I'm banking on it. We don't have a period in history where the mining stocks have never responded ultimately to a higher gold price. It's not immediate, but as I wrote a couple months ago, I think the fuse is lit because we've already seen a higher gold price. We already see producer margins dramatically higher. It's a matter of time before it goes down to the developers and then ultimately down to the juniors. You still want to own the best ones because they won't all perform. Even in the mania in 1979, there were stocks that lost money. So you do want to make sure you focus on the better ones.
And let's talk about the silver mining sector. Obviously, a smaller handful of stocks, silver nowhere near all-time highs. How are you viewing that sector? Do you think there's opportunity there? What are the main opportunities and what are the main challenges you're seeing when it comes to the silver miners at present? And Jeff, I'll start with you on this one.
Well, I think your audience knows that silver outperforms gold in the long run. Gold leads, silver lags when a new bull market starts. We've kind of seen that, although silver at one point had outperformed gold to date. So, I think that's still ahead as well. And then, of course, the silver miners, which are extremely volatile, one of the most volatile, asset classes you can find on the planet. They're really going to rip when silver breaks into nears all-time highs and then probably goes beyond that as well. So there's going to be some big gains made by silver. I still put higher confidence in gold simply because it's gold and I have to. But if we get this market that I think we're going to get, silver will ultimately outperform gold on a percentage basis, and the silver stocks with leverage to that, we could see some really big gains.
Lobo, your thoughts?
I agree. The way I've been looking at it is I have much as Jeff just said, I have higher confidence of gold heading higher in 2025, just because it's gold. But whenever silver does move, it may or may not happen. It is subject to more industrial use, the supply and demand there. If we have a surprise hard landing and the money helicopters are delayed and taking off or something, that could hurt silver more than gold in the near term. Or rather, that shouldn't hurt gold at all, but it could hurt silver. So I have higher conviction that gold, trends higher from here. But ultimately, 9 times out of 10, silver ends up gaining more than gold before the final reel is played. So I have higher confidence in more upside in silver. So it depends on what do we mean, which is better. Well, it may be a little bit more confidence with gold, but more alpha with silver. So people call me Dollar Silver and all this stuff, but I'm not a silver bear. And the only other thing I would say is, as you say, a smaller pool of stocks. Many of them are in basket case countries or countries going the wrong direction. And I would encourage the audience not to compromise on political risk, or rather, if you're going to go into the kind of place where the government is clearly going in the wrong direction, or has a history of nationalization, or has protests and roadblocks where you can't build your mine, or the bureaucrats decide to yank your license suddenly, understand that you are don't sugarcoat that. Don't pretend, oh, it's okay, or my project's underground, so I'm not worried about open pit mining bans, right? Don't, if you're making excuses for your stock, you need to stop, take stock. And if you want to go there, but go there with your eyes wide open and understand the increased level of risk you're taking. Personally, I'm much more political risk averse than Jeff's and my mentors in the prior generation. I just
yeah. Yeah.
I believe you both are, because Jeff, you've brought up that issue as well in the past. And when I speak to Rick Rule, for example, he's a little bit more lenient when it comes to those things and believes, well, there's different types of, jurisdictional risk in different areas, including North America. Global Atomic comes to mind in the uranium sector when it came to the coup there. And now we're seeing the government has seemingly taken over one of Orano's mines, which is very concerning. A lot of bearish news there. And yet, Lobo, as you said, we see a lot of investors or speculators, we have to call them, on X, chiming in and saying, well, it's fine. Global Atomic's project is already this and that.
Sorry, let me jump in. I wouldn't call them speculators. In my mind, as Casey taught both Jeff and I, speculation is a discipline. It's not gambling. And if so our other mentors, you just mentioned Rick, Rick likes to say, if your method is got a hunch, bet a bunch, that is not what Doug Casey taught Jeff and me. And so I don't generally evaluate stocks for free on interviews, but you brought up the example of Global. Let me just talk about the psychology. What was so striking about that is you had the coup d'etat, a bunch of people sold. I did. I had owned the stock and I sold. Just, you never know what's going to happen. And it was just like you said, so many people came out of the woodwork with excuses and, this isn't so bad, blah, 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 blah. And darn if that stock didn't go way back up again. I don't remember if it quite recovered, but it almost recovered to pre-coup d'etat levels. Yeah. And then, the junta started doing other scary things and went right back down again. But all those people who told themselves stories and chased that stock all the way back up again, there is a lesson to be learned there. Like, I have no future seeing crystal ball, but when something like that happens, the odds are unacceptably high that there will be more bad news ahead.
Yeah. In fact, when I hear about a drill result, Jesse, that someone will say, hey, did you see that drill hit from so-and-so? And if I'm not familiar with the company, the first thing I want to know is, okay, who's behind it and where is it? Because those are two non-starters for me. If those two things aren't in place, then it's a no-go. I don't care if it was 10 grams over 100 meters or whatever. I'm just, and I'll miss some. I recognize that. I will miss out on some stocks because I'm not willing to take that extra layer of risk. But we're in the junior sector. This is the riskiest sector on planet Earth. I don't need to take more risk. I can take a disciplined approach. Yeah, you can take a disciplined approach, and you can find many winners. I can't even follow all the stocks that are in North America, let alone starting to look over in Western Africa or something.
Yeah, great thoughts. And Jeff, I want to talk about an article you wrote recently called Your Money is Naked: 5 Reasons to Store Some Gold Outside Your Home Country and Where to Do So. Now, that will sound sacrilegious to a lot of gold bugs, the hardcores who believe that if you don't hold it, you don't own it. Explain why it makes sense to store gold outside of your possession in another country, at least some percentage of it, I think you're saying. And then, Lobo, I'd
Right.
like to get your thoughts as well.
Well, it isn't if you don't own it, it's if you can't hold it, you don't own it. You have to have reasonable access to it, however you might define reasonable. But the fact that you have all of your physical gold holdings in your home country, that risk is trumps any other consideration. So I think you want to have a plan B in place. And that's why I wrote that. You want your money to have an additional layer of clothing. That's why it's naked if you don't have some protection for it. So that's why I believe that everyone should have some of their gold holdings, not all of them, but some of them in a jurisdiction, a positive jurisdiction other than your own, in case you need to resort to Plan B. And if you don't, if ever need it, well, great. You didn't suffer any big loss or inconvenience, or you didn't pay more, generally speaking. So I think it's just very wise financial planning, especially given all the geopolitical concerns, the financial concerns, the market concerns. We have so many vulnerabilities in the system right now that I think it's only wise to have some in another location.
And Lobo, before I jump over to you, I just want to follow up and ask you, Jeff, do you think it's also important to diversify your banking so that you have perhaps a bank account, one or more bank accounts in other jurisdictions outside of your own as well?
Yeah, that would follow along with having some gold in another country, because then if you want to go to that country and cash out the gold, you can go to the local bank. So yes, a lot of this does depend on someone's net worth. If
Right.
you have no net worth, this may be less of a concern. But even in that situation, I would build toward having enough net worth and income where you can begin to store some gold outside your home country. I think it's important. It's political insurance, if you will.
Yes. And Lobo, your thoughts?
So to segue from what Jeff said, even if you have no net worth, you have other assets, including the one you sit on, right? So diversifying your assets into multiple jurisdictions. I mean, just the whole permanent tourism idea, I think, is very sound. And you don't have to expatriate to even to just begin to pursue it. If your bank accounts, your employment, your tax situation, your house, if everything is in one country, and heaven forbid the worst comes to worst in that country, you are screwed, right? If just some of it is diversified, if you open up a bank account in another country, buy a house in some other country, or live in a different country from the place that you work. And the way Doug likes to put it is, at some point when the knives come out and the government start looking at their milk cows as though they're beef cows, then no one government has you on their plate, right? They can just carve you up at will. So it's just a smart thing. But one more, a quick story on this. It reminded me as Jeff was speaking. I remember talking to an uncle of mine who was, the rich uncle in the family. He was widely regarded as, the one from that generation who was most financially successful. And I remember when I was working for Doug and I met my uncle and I was telling him about what I did, and this subject came up, and I think he had some gold, and he was worried about it. He lived in Mexico, and their home invasion is a significant concern at any income level. And I told him this idea, well, diversify. And I told him that Doug had, I don't know how many, he's got houses in half a dozen countries. He's got a stash of gold and just as many, if not more. And I remember my uncle's eyes just like widening like saucers and going like, wow, that is security. Like he had never really thought about it before in that way. So yeah, it's perfectly sensible.
Yeah. And
Jesse, I
that,
looked at my holdings at the company that I keep them at. And I get a statement every month and I look at that. And as the price of gold and silver has been going up, the value of that account's been going up. And I look at that and I go, you know what? If worse came to worse, that would at least give me a good start on something new or different if I lost everything here. And I'm not saying we will. You're basically trying to protect yourself against crisis because you become the beef cow when crisis hits and the government, views your money as part of their solution. So that's why you want to do it is to have some insurance there.
Yeah, and
Yes.
you don't want to use your insurance. That's not why you have it. You hope never to use your insurance.
Yeah, right.
You sure want it.
Yeah, and I have being an expat in Serbia, having left Canada, I can very much relate to that. The feeling of just being able to be ungovernable in a way where, okay, I'm living in this jurisdiction now. If something goes wrong here, I'll just leave and go somewhere else. That is a great feeling to have. So very much resonates with me what you guys are saying. Lobo, I want to bring up something regarding gold versus silver's performance that you wrote in the Independent Speculator newsletter. We touched on it a little bit earlier. You wrote, I have more confidence that gold will head higher in 2025 than silver, but I expect silver to rise higher than gold on a percentage gain basis when it does finally break out decisively. Maybe you could dive a little bit deeper on that and give us an insight into what the indicators you're watching are that led you to these conclusions. Also, would like to get, as a follow-up question, your thoughts on copper for 2025, because I know that's something you're very bullish on. And then, Jeff, I'll get your thoughts as well.
All right. Well, it's pretty simple. This isn't rocket science. I mean, gold is nominally at least near all-time highs. Silver is nowhere near. Think about it. For gold to double, for example, from here, implies what, $5,400 gold? In a world where we're looking at $5,400 gold, we probably are looking at our insurance and batten down the hatches. I'm not sure I want that to happen, at least not in the space of 1 year. Whereas if silver goes up 100%, that's $60 silver. I don't see the world falling apart in that type of scenario. It could just be when silver goes into one of its mini manias, which there have been two with the Hunt brothers. And then in 2010, when silver just took off way ahead of gold and went nuts. And in both cases, there was the safe haven monetary metal demand for gold. And then there were other factors in the Hunt brothers. It was the Hunt brothers trying to corner the silver market. In 2010, it was industrial concerns, GFC curtailing supply because most silver is a byproduct. So in both cases, you had demand going up and concern about supply, and silver went nuts, almost to $50 or to around $50. So, I could see a circumstance like that happening in 2025. I'm not predicting that, but I could without the world going nuts. Whereas for gold to go to 5,400, it's a much bigger ask. So it's as simple as that. But I'm not really looking for it. I'm just saying, and by the way, so to segue to the other point, my highest confidence trade for this year was gold, and that's worked out well. For last year, 23, it was uranium, which worked out terrifically. For next year, it's neither, and it's not silver either. It's copper, as you mentioned. And the reasons tie into what we're just talking about. For silver to go up 50% from here, for gold to go up 50%, 50 would still be a huge move. We're looking at almost $4,000 gold there. So that's a huge move. For silver to go up 50%, that'd be $45 silver. Pretty close to its previous nominal all-time highs. That could happen, but I'm not sure that it will. For copper to go up 50% or 100%, well, 50% is easy. That's just $6. We've been there before. A double from here, that's a bit more of a stretch, but $8 copper is not insane. It's certainly the sort of thing that we've seen when lithium or nickel or anything else necessary, and I'm not picking on energy metals, I'm just saying these are metals that have recently gone nuts. So I could see that happening in 2025. And even if it doesn't go up that much, it is vital. It isn't just an EV metal, right? It's Dr. Copper because it's an essential industrial metal. And I do think that hard landing or no hard landing, the US administration's policies are near-term inflationary. If there is a hard landing, then I think we see the money helicopters fly. Globally, we have, if not a de facto recession, we have global weakness, and money helicopters are going to be flying. All of this is very bullish for copper in the year ahead. My only concern or question really is, do I buy now or do I wait? And because I still think we're likely to see more pain in the US before the money helicopters really fly with gusto, I'm taking the time to build up my shopping list now. I'm not buying copper stocks yet. But in 2025, just simply based on where we're at now, what's more relatively on sale? What is the history of these metals? It's much easier for me to see on a percent gain basis, really big gains in copper. And that's also a pretty small universe of stocks. So some pretty exciting opportunities there ahead.
And Jeff, your thoughts on gold versus silver's performance in 2025 and copper?
Oh, well, I don't predict what's going to happen this year. The great thing is, Jesse, I don't have to answer your question. I own both. I own both gold and silver. I own both gold and silver stocks. I buy them when they're on sale. So that's how I view it. I kind of got tired of the trying to call for a doom and gloom, the timing of a doom and gloom crash or whatever. It's very uh, it's much more, what's the word? Nice now to be able to not have to worry about that. I just own gold, I own silver, I own the stocks, I buy them when they're on sale. I think silver outperforms gold. If we get on a big run here, I'm probably feeling a little stronger about gold than silver. Kind of the things that Lobo and I have already said. So when it comes to copper, there's some very strong core fundamentals, structural fundamentals there that are in place. You have supply falling and is projected to continue to fall in the medium term, let's say. But the big issue is you have demand that is projected to increase dramatically over the next few years and even the next 10 to 15 years. So even if those projections are only half right, you're going to have a deficit in the copper industry for many years. And I think that trumps, maybe a recession concern or something like that. So I do own copper stocks. I'm buying copper stocks when they go on sale. They have not moved yet, so that opportunity is still in front of us. Now, one thing I would say is I have tracked the copper price in every recession since 1970, and the copper price has never risen in a US recession, never once, during the period of the recession itself. However, what we usually see is after that recession is over, or even when it's starting to end, then copper starts to move. And of course, the copper mining stocks, like mining stocks are with their underlying metal, begin to move as well. So, I don't fear the recession so much. I buy opportunity when I see it. And so that's how I'm kind of handling the copper market. I think that's going to be a strong bull market for many years.
Well, we've discussed gold, silver, and copper. Are there any other areas of the market right now that you're currently looking for value, whether that's commodities or otherwise, and anything that you think could have upside potential up ahead? Jeff, I'll start with you on this one.
I'm looking less at the metal than I am at an actual mining stock. Is there some compelling reason for this particular metals company to have a discovery or an advancement of a deposit or a significant resource upgrade or some major catalyst that could be transformational for that company that's going to make that stock go up, not 10 or 20%, but double or triple, almost regardless of what the underlying metal may be doing. The underlying metal rising obviously would have be helpful, but I don't think that's a requirement for me when I'm looking specifically at mining stocks. That's what I'm focused on our newsletter. So, but that's going to include gold, silver. Still look at some uraniums, copper, and maybe some lithium. But again, it's more of a focus on the mining stock than it is on the underlying metal itself.
And Lobo, anything else you're watching right now? Obviously, uranium's on your radar. I believe in your newsletter you've mentioned that you're still looking at uranium plays, and anywhere else?
Yeah, it's just quickly, I still like uranium a lot. It's corrected. That was predictable after pulling a hockey stick. It has corrected to the long-term contract price, which is still on an upward trend. So I'm very bullish. I just don't expect it to do another hockey stick. Kind of like with our copper, gold, silver conversation, for uranium to double from here, $160 a pound. Um, while we are visibly seeing high prices in new production, that's a tall order, certainly in 2025. So I still like it, very optimistic. But that's why I'm more bullish on copper. It's not that I don't love uranium anymore. It's just I see more upside potential in the copper. If I can do my usual rain on the parade routine, I have to say I keep hearing from a lot of people that, oh, this is going to be the year that platinum breaks out, or PGMs. They're on sale. They're too cheap. Platinum shouldn't be cheaper than gold. But the problem with that is I've heard that for the last 15 years. And U.S. recession or not, the weakness that we're seeing globally is very bad for the auto industry. I mean, just look at what's happening with VW. And this isn't about electric cars. This is just about the global economy. And sorry, but the major, not just the lion's share, but like the huge consumer of PGMs is the auto industry. And you can look at past recessions. Typically, auto sales dip for 2 to 3 years. And even if things turn up, the money helicopters fly. Okay, you go back to the store, you buy stuff. You don't rush out and buy a car is the first thing you do when you start feeling a little more optimistic. That after the house, that's typical family's second largest purchase. So at some point, believe it or not, dear friends, I expect to be a platinum bull, maybe even a palladium bull at some point. I'm just not there yet. And the fact that it's cheap does not mean that it can't get cheaper or that it must go up this year or in the year ahead. That's all I'm saying.
Fantastic thoughts. I've spoken to some people who've taken a bullish stance on platinum recently, so it's really great to hear an opposing viewpoint. Well, gentlemen, this has been a fantastic conversation. Thank you so much for joining us today. Jeff, tell us about the Gold Advisor. Tell us about PayDirt.
Well, yes, I am at the thegoldenadvisor.com. Everything is under that umbrella, and I'm pretty excited about 2025 because, as you may know, we did acquire Gwen Preston's Resource Maven newsletter. She wanted to do something different. The dust has settled there. We have a brand new website. We have a full staff. We are ready to rock and roll. We're launching 2 new products in January. Peter's launching one, a free one. I'm launching another paid one. So we're very busy. We're gearing up and the only reason I'm doing this isn't to, try to make money off subscriptions. The reason I'm doing this is because I believe in the basic, fundamental, core argument for owning gold and mining stocks at this particular point in history. I think we're in the right place at the right time in the right metals, and that's why I'm doing this, and I am pretty excited. So I invite people to come and check it out and see what you think.
Fantastic. I'll put a link to the goldadvisor.com and just quickly a plug for your book. Give us some info on PayDirt if you can.
Oh yeah, PayDirt wrote that. Largely, some of that is based on my time with Doug Casey's firm, which included Lobo at the time. Lobo is featured in the book. But it's the method I've used to personally succeed. And what I did was something different. I interviewed 16 other people in the industry and put them in the book as well, all the way down from, the Rick Rules of the world, all the way down to geologists you've never heard of, all giving their input into what they look for a potential winning mining stock. So it's just chock full of information, and it starts off with the scariest mine I've ever entered, which you can read on the website for free as the sample chapter. So it's a fun read. We made it entertaining, so I hope people find it useful.
Great, and that's on the goldadvisor.com. People can find that too, right?
Yep, there's a tab for the books there. You'll see my book. Peter has a book as well. We have another starter guide, so tons of resources there.
Fantastic. Lobo, tell us about the independent speculator.
All right. Well, I guess just to be a contrarian wolf, I will say that I'm doing everything I'm doing to make money selling subscriptions.
I love
And
it.
my evil plan is to be as useful as I possibly can and deliver as much value as I can so that people will want to keep subscribing. And so far, that's pretty good. We have a very high renewal rate. But before that, if you want to check out, see how I think and whether I might be a due diligence guy for you, just come to independentspeculator.com. We have a free weekly digest. It's called the Speculator's Digest. And you may or may not like what I have to say there, but I will make one promise, and that is that we will not spam you with a flood of daily advertisements. I hate that. You get one email per week. That's it. You can see if you like what I think.
Fantastic. And as a subscriber to that newsletter, I can attest that it is fantastic. It's excellent. Thank you both for joining us today. I'm looking very forward to seeing you at the Vancouver Resource Investment Conference, January 19th and 20th. Guys, get your free tickets in the description below, and hopefully we can continue this conversation there.
Yeah, see you there.
Thanks for having me, Jesse. See you there.